Good afternoon and welcome to Performance St. Paul's at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Key West, Florida. Welcome back to From the Organ. This series has changed and grown a bit from a weekly offering with just me at the organ console to a once-a-month offering where I've invited other organists that, along with me and some special guests who live afar, live here in Key West and the surrounding area. Today I would like to welcome Tom Scheck, Dean Warden, and that special guest, Linda Sparks, to the organ console. Linda was organist here at St. Paul's from 2013 through September of 2016. We are so glad that you found your way back to St. Paul's while you're here having an extended stay as a supply cantor at Mary Star of the Sea. Before we begin today, I want to tell you just a short story. Just the other day, I was in the sanctuary while Tom was here practicing. He wasn't alarmed, but he said that he thought he heard something alive in the console. I told him I knew just what it was, and could he help me? He said, of course. And just at that time, our senior warden, Ray Warren, also showed up. You see, we had a little mischief in the church just the day before, but we discovered that it was no person. So Tom and I rolled the organ console, rolled top down, and took off the top. And guess what? There, hunkered down in the organ, inside was a 3-foot-long iguana. It's been cold these last several days, even in Key West. And this iguana took advantage of the fact that we had all the doors open to the church during these cooler days. He came in and found the warmest spot in the building, in the organ console. I am so grateful that our very brave Ray took the net, captured the bandit, and escorted it back outside, and yelled in a very loud guttural sound to scare it far away. I'm so glad that this happened on Tuesday, not today. And, oh yes, by the way, the doors have been closed every day since. And again, thank you, Tom and Ray. Now let us sit back and enjoy as I first invite Dean to the organ console today.
Thank you, Tim. Today I'm going to begin with a piece by Leon Bollmann called Prelude Pastoral from Editiom Suite. Hailing from Ensisheim in the Alsace region of France, Leon Bollmann lived a very short life of 35 years from 1862 to 1897, but he composed 160 pieces during his 16-year career. He's best known for his Suite Gothique for organ, but his instruments of choice were, in addition to organ, also piano, and he composed for chamber music and orchestral works, along with one small vocal set. In Paris, he was taught by famous organist and composer Eugène Gigot, who later adopted Bollmann. His compositions lie in the post-romantic style, with lush harmonies, and he took influence from César Franck and Camille Saint-Saëns. Prelude Pastoral is the first of 4 pieces from the Editiom Suite, published near the end of his life in 1896. Reminder, he died in 1897. It uses a lilting melodic theme to carry us through a handful of key changes with simple but warm harmonies. My next piece is titled Offertoire ou Sortie by de la Tombelle. Staying in France, and at the same time period, we now meet, this is all one name, Antoine Louis Joseph Garand Fernand Fouant de la Tombelle. He was born in Paris in 1854, 8 years before Bohlmann. His mother, Louise Garand, was a student of Franz Liszt and taught him piano lessons as a child. He then studied at the Conservatoire de Paris with famous organist and composer Théodore Dubois. As a composer, he wrote many choral works, including operettas, oratorios, and masses. He also composed for orchestra, chamber, harmonium, and obviously the organ. In addition to music, he was also an active writer, a columnist, sculptor, painter, art photographer, music ethnologist, and astronomer. He died in 1928. Offertoire ou sortie translates to offertory or exit, letting us know that de la Tombelle intended this piece to be played during the Mass, either while the Eucharist was being prepared or as a postlude. Choice of registration would likely differ based on when the piece was to be played during the Mass. I have chosen a registration as if it was a sortie, which highlights the recurring theme throughout the work. I personally think it works best as a postlude, as it's short enough that you might still have some parishioners in the church when it's finished. My final piece today will be Prelude number 2 in G major by Mendelssohn. We now jump back in time to the early Romantic period with another long name and another short life. Jacob Ludwig Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy, born in Germany in 1809, was a musical prodigy. Everyone knows him for his Christmas carol, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, but he wrote many symphonies and concertos, along with chamber music, solo piano and organ works, and oratorios such as Elijah. He died in 1847 at the age of 38. He was conservative in his compositional taste, which set him apart from his contemporaries such as Liszt and Wagner. Prelude number 2 is from 3 Preludes and Fugues, opus 37, published in 1837. The harmonies are rich with many suspensions, but it still has a very conservative classical era style to it. now I'd like to welcome Tom Scheck to the organ.
Hello. I'd like to thank Tim once again for inviting me to play on this program. It's a big pleasure. If while I'm playing this morning, you have a hankering for a hunk of bread or a glass of wine, it may be because I'm playing 3 settings of communion hymns. The first is by Leo Sowerby. Sowerby was born in 1895 and died in 1968. He's best known as the organist choir master at St. James Cathedral in Chicago, and then later in life he became the founding director of the College of Church Musicians at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. He composed many compositions in many different, for many different instruments, voices, and organ. He's best known for his organ compositions and his choral compositions. This piece that I'm playing today is his setting of a hymn tune called Song 46, which is, as I said, it's a communion hymn. In the Episcopal hymnal, it's known as Draw Nigh and Take the Body of the Lord. The setting is, the harmonies are very similar to the settings of Herbert Howells, if you're familiar with Howells settings. Sowerby's hands must have been very large because some of the stretches here are very large. Several times you'll have a stretch of 1/10, which for an organist is a pretty good stretch unless you have large hands. Enjoy. I forgot to mention, this tune is a rather short tune. In the hymnal, it's only 2 lines long. Sowerby goes through the entire tune 3 times in his composition. The first 2 times, the melody is played on the pedals with the feet. The third time, it's played in the upper voice on the manuals. it might be helpful to have the music right side up. It's easier to read that way. Next, I'd like to play a setting by Paul Mons. Paul Mons is best known for being organist and choir master of Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He's also known for choral compositions and organ compositions. Probably his best known choral composition is an anthem called E'en So Lord Quickly Come. It's sung worldwide by church choirs worldwide. It's an anthem piece, and it was sung as Paul Mons lay dying. It was sung by his family surrounding him. It was one of his favorite compositions. This piece is a set of variations, 4 variations. The first variation is quite short, with the melody and the upper voice, so you can hear the melody. The second one is kind of a, I'm not sure what you call this. It's in typical Mons style. The third variation is on soft stops, and it has a middle section where the melody is played in canon with the melody and the manuals and in the feet. And then the fourth variation starts off very similar to the third variation, and it has the melody played by the left hand. The name of the tune is Herr Jesu Christ dich zu uns wendt, German chorale, obviously. The English translation of that is Lord Jesus Christ, be present now. And that's the tune that's the text, that Mons had in mind when he said this. In the Episcopal hymnal, this text is not in the Episcopal hymnal. It is in the hymnal as a communion hymn, which is Lord Jesus, pardon me, O Saving Victim is the name of the text in the Episcopal hymn number 310. The third and final piece I will play is by Gerald Neer. Gerald Neer was born in 1942, and he's considered to be one of the finest composers, living composers of music for organ and choir. He's probably best known, besides his organ compositions, as the organist choir master of the cathedral in Dallas, Texas. This piece I'm playing is his setting of Schmücke dich, O liebe Seele, which of course is another German chorale. The English translation is Deck Thyself, My Soul, with Gladness, another communion hymn. He writes this as an homage to JSB, and it is very much in the style of Johann Sebastian Bach. The style, not the harmonies. The harmonies are very much Gerald Neer. He has a couple places in this piece where in one voice he has an A natural, and in another voice he has an A flat. In another place he has in one voice an E natural, and in another voice an E flat. That's something Bach would never do. Because it is in the style of J.S. Bach, I assume he does not tell what registrations he wants you to use, but I assume that he would prefer you use registrations similar to what Bach would have used. So that's what I'm using for this. Gerald Neer does not generally tell you what stops he wants you to use. He lets that up to you to decide what you want to use. Sowerby and Mantz, the other two composers I played, are very specific in the sounds that they want from the organ. Gerald Neer is not. He just puts the notes on the paper and dynamic markings, and that's about it. Linda Sparks.
Hello. I have decided today to play the final movement of the Mendelssohn First Organ Concerto, First Organ Sonata in F minor, although this one's in F major. And we don't need to revisit all of the details of Mendelssohn's life, except to talk about how it is that he became the preeminent composer and celebrated musician of the early Romantic period in the world. And he was born, he had every possible reason to be in that position. He was born of very wealthy parents in Germany who knew that it was very important for their children to receive wonderful educations in music, in literature, in painting. Mendelssohn was also a consummate athlete and was well liked by all. His parents, however, again, played the pivotal role. His mother was his first piano teacher, and when they moved, they made sure that they got him into the teachers who could make sure that he had the very best possible education in everything. It was nice that they were wealthy enough to do that. We know that he is positioned historically in exactly the right place, the place that he was destined to be in when you look back in history and when you look forward to where he became in regards to that crossover between the classic era and the Romantic era. He was, of course, the one we remember for rediscovering, although he didn't rediscover, but he had such an admiration for Bach and being a German, and also for Mozart and Handel. And we know that he became the musician very early on. It's a good thing he didn't live, as we know, except for until age 38. Oh, by the way, his birthday was yesterday in 1809, February 3rd, St. Blaise. So he, by the age of 16, was performing quite publicly, and no, he was performing by age 9 and composing very fluently by the age of 16. He then started his travels, sometimes with his sister Fanny, and he was fortunate to know and go to the important cities of all of Europe and played those instruments, the pianos and the organs particularly. We know that the organs are, to have a wonderful organ is a real blessing, that it is a hard thing to obtain and then maintain an organ in the way it is to be played in any kind of vitality and in the way that he wanted it to be played. He used his knowledge of Bach, and we hear that when he first of all, he was a conductor. He went back to Leipzig and also conducted the St. Matthew's Passion. We remember that, and we are told that he was that person who revived it. Again, we know that there's more to the story. He also traveled extensively. He went first to Paris. He traveled to Italy. We remember his Italian symphony with fondness, and then he fell in love with England and particularly Scotland, and wrote there the Scottish Symphony as well as Hebrides Overture, Fingal's Cave, and lots of other things we think about. His music, this movement of the sonata that I'm going to play today, it is huge. It is, he says, if I write fortissimo, I mean a full organ. Well, I'm not even using the full organ here, but it is a big sound, and it is what he wanted to have happen. His sonatas were in the spirit of Bach. That is, they were not the classical symphony sonatas that we think of in terms of Mozart or Beethoven, but they are more or less suites, likely composed by key relation and that sort of thing, rather than the formality that became later the attributes of the sonata form. It also we have gorgeous melodies. We have imitative motives that we hear progressively through his movements. We know him to be the forerunner, the forerunner of what became in the Romantic time the hugeness, the majesty in music. We can hear that, we can feel that in his movements. He is, I love his works. I think they're fabulous. I guess that's where I'll end that today. Let me get ready here. Excuse me, just one more minute. There we go. Okay, so this is the Mendelssohn F minor sonata, the last movement, the Allegro assai vivace. Tim Peterson to the organ bench, his organ bench.
All right. Perhaps my favorite genre of music is that from during the Baroque period. We have so many well-known composers from that era: Vivaldi, Scarlatti, Telemann, Couperin, Pachelbel, Buxtehude, and so many others. Perhaps the greatest was Johann Sebastian Bach. But who among you out there remember English Baroque composer Henry Herron, who lived from around 1730 to 1795? Little is known about Mr. Herron. We do know that he was organist at St. Magnus, London Bridge by 1745, and seems to have stayed there up until his death. He is frequently mentioned in the same breath as his more well-known contemporaries, such as William Walland, William Boyce, and John Stanley. Known for his published works, the Voluntaries, Mr. Herron composed a set of 10 of them for the English church organ. He first published them in 1760 in an edition titled Published for the Author. They were later reissued in the edition that I use, around 1765. The voluntary was a popular type of music during the Baroque period, not least thanks to the well-known trumpet voluntary by Jeremiah Clarke. The term voluntary was used primarily as a musical form composed for the organ. We know that the German organs flourished with the pipe organ, the German churches. Full pedal board, many two-manual, and even some three-manual instruments. Similar-sized instruments in France as well. The English, on the other hand, had no interest in developing the pipe organ. It was used only to accompany the choir. And not until the late Baroque period, it did not even have pedal boards. We know that this composition, written without pedals, was composed for the organ, simply with the title Voluntary. Here is Mr. Herron's first voluntary for organ in D major. In this work, there are 4 short movements with contrasting tempos: slow, fast, slow, fast. I would like to now play two short pieces from the English repertoire from the Romantic period, compositions by Sir Walter Galpin Alcock and Sir Charles Villiers Stanford. Mr. Alcock lived from 1861 to 1947, which puts him squarely in the middle of the late Romantic to the early 20th century music. His style is clearly rooted in the Romantic period. He studied composition with Arthur Sullivan and organ with John Stainer. High-quality pedigree, I am sure that you agree. He was professor of organ at the Royal College of Music, London, and highly regarded, well known, as an English organist and composer. He held a number of important posts as organist, such as Holy Trinity Sloane Street and St. Margaret's, Westminster Cathedral, as well as assistant organist at Westminster Abbey. He also was well distinguished as playing at the coronations of three monarchs, Edward VII in 1902, George V in 1911, and George VI in 1937. Of course, all of them at the Abbey. I will play his piece titled Impromptu, first published in 1913. I will then play a short prelude from Stanford's first set of 6 short preludes and fugues for organ. Stanford lived from 1852 to 1924, and born in Dublin, he was an accomplished composer, music teacher, and conductor. He was educated at the University of Cambridge, and then studied music in Leipzig and Berlin. Stanford served as the organist at Trinity College, Cambridge, for quite some time. And in 1882, at age 29, he was one of the founding professors of the Royal College of Music, where he taught composition for the rest of his life. Stanford is best remembered for his choral works for church performance, chiefly composed in the Anglican tradition. He was a dedicated composer of opera, but none of his 9 completed operas are known and only seldom performed. Some critics regard Stanford, together with a good friend Hubert Parry, as responsible for a great renaissance in music for Britain during this period. Mr. Alcock, and then Mr. Stanford. My last piece today is a free arrangement on the hymn to Nettleton. Words that we often sing with that text or that tune is "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." This setting is by contemporary composer and arranger Joel Rainey. Mr. Rainey earned his master's in piano performance from the Juilliard School in New York and continued his training through work as an accompanist in the theater, as a pianist on TV commercials, and as a church organist. Since 2011, he has been organist and choir director at the First Baptist Church of Oak Park, Illinois. Today, he is published composer with well over 100 compositions, mainly religious in nature. And now his setting of "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." I again want to thank Dean, Tom, and Linda for joining me here today. I'm so thankful that we share this little island together. And I'm so glad they're so eager to say hello and be here today. Of course, we always want to thank you for sitting with us for a while. Music brings us so much more joy when we can share it with others. We hope this has brought you joy this afternoon. If you are so moved and would like to make a donation to the organ fund at St. Paul's, we would all be so honored. It is with generous gifts of people like you that we are able to keep the organ at St. Paul's in good shape. Please send a check to St. Paul's Episcopal Church, 401 Duval Street, Key West, Florida, 33040. And please make a note of it in the memo line of your check that it is for the organ fund. Please stay happy, safe, and healthy. Until next month, Soli Deo Gloria.